I started looking, and when I was younger, had problems with relationships, and I didn't really want to invest into people because I knew that they can leave. And a good thing is, like, that's a good trait to have if you have to part ways with people. Bad thing is you can't get close to anyone. So she caught me on my bullshit, and it was like, all right, you know what I mean? You forgive me? Yeah, okay. But what are we gonna do? She's like, no, you're gonna do better. And I'm like, all right, and slowly, absolutely. So the winner's paradigm is all about, how a winner would interpret their struggles. But we need to talk about the actual things that affect us as well, because if we're not present in the moment, we don't heal our trauma, you're never going to be where you need to be. And even at that time, you're going to run into it, where in my case, I got married, all that trauma came out. That would be the one thing, is you're going to influence people, period. But it's really about going down to the underlying problem. How are you making an impact? How are you making a difference in the community and other people's lives? Or are you just being that one that's just going along with everything?
Welcome everyone to the Revolutionary Man podcast. I'm the founder of The Awakened Man and your host, Alundra. So how many times have you found yourself not achieving success? Still grasping for that brass ring. For some, success is really easily defined. Every morning I wake up on the right side of the grass is a good day. But what about bigger goals, more ambitions and desires? These can be much more challenging to achieve, let alone define. And today my guest is going to share his incredible story and what he calls the winner's paradigm. Now, before we get into all that, I just want to remind you to hit like, subscribe, and share on your favorite platform so you can stay updated on our latest content, as well as helping me grow the Awakened Man message. And for that, I just want to say I'm truly grateful. So with everything being said, let's get on with today's episode.
The average man today is sleepwalking through life, many never reaching their true potential, let alone ever crossing the finish line to living a purposeful life. Yet, the hunger still exists, albeit buried amidst his cluttered mind, misguided beliefs, and values that no longer serve him. It's time to align yourself for greatness. It's time to become a revolutionary man. Stay strong, my brother.
So let me ask you a couple of questions. What is your definition of success? And then how do you know that you've achieved it? Depending on how you answer that first question will have a huge bearing on the second, won't it? But defining our success is only part of the solution. We still need to have the right mindset, because without that, our goals remain only as dreams. So allow me at this moment to introduce my guest. Alundas Havens is a Marine Corps veteran, a father, and an entrepreneur, and his podcast, The Winner's Paradigm, dives deep into the psychology of successful people, where they share their trials and tribulations, lessons and applications for what it took for them to reach that next level. And as a mindset coach, Alundas' work helps others flip their script on a definition of success that is right for them. Welcome to the show, Alundas. How are things today?
I'm doing well, brother. Thank you again. I know it was a little bit to get me on the show. Life was happening, so I really appreciate you, brother, being flexible.
Yeah, absolutely. No problem. It's all about perseverance, right, my friend? That's how we get to where we are.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Alundas, I always start asking, the first question I like to ask my guests is a little bit about a hero's quest. And we talk about about all of us being on a hero's quest here at The Awakened Man. So tell us a little about your journey and how the challenges that you faced in your life, how that paved the road for who you are today and the work that you're doing.
Absolutely, brother. So I'm from Fresno, California originally. My parents were 19, 21 when they had me. So very young, they were partying. My dad's bringing girls in and out. They're both alcoholics and narcissists. So it was one of those for me, when you have those limiting beliefs and they put their bullshit on you. And in my case, they showed me what not to do. It was one of those cases where I started looking, and when I was younger, I had problems with relationships, and I didn't really want to invest into people because I knew that they can leave. And a good thing is, like, that's a good trait to have if you have to part ways with people. Bad thing is you can't get close to anyone. So I always went through this, had a racist stepdad as well that ruined my identity problem because I didn't really know who I was. And two, I could only be myself at one house partially and one the other way. I couldn't really speak my views. If I did, it was a problem. And now we're engaging in combat, or he was on, the right, and he's really conservative. And I'm like, I just don't believe in all the things that you say. And he's like, well, you're a liberal. I'm like, okay. And it was just like, you're okay with being labeled as that? And I'm like, well, I don't believe I'm a liberal. And it's like, because I fall more in the middle. It's just socially, I believe more liberal, conservatively, economically. And, even now I could still talk with people. So I say that just to paint the picture. Those were some of the things I battled. Ended up, getting in an argument with him one day. And that's where I was just like, you know what, I got to move on with my life. Like, I can't be doing this because, again, they showed me all the things not to do. And it was always filling that void, going to another father figure, going towards, hanging out with friends and trying to make money because I didn't want to ask for anything from my parents. And it was one of those, like, they wouldn't even give it to me. So for me, I was having all these problems, go to the military and never really solved the trauma of my childhood, being abused. Never really had that, still had the problems with my parents. When I turned 21, my dad calls me and starts complaining about growing up for him and how much of a problem. I'm like, bro, you're 47, you're going through all these things. You need to go to therapist, you need to get some help. Like, do whatever you got to do, but you're not right. And he was just like, well, you've never went through any adversity in your life. And I'm like, man, I had a restraining order at one point in time. So how do I not have adversity when we went to supervised visits and I'm screaming, I hate you and all these things. And now that's messing with my mind. And when I was on boot leave, my stepdad almost shot my wrestling coach. So that brought in another thing of trauma where I didn't solve it. Plus all the other shit, one of my cousins got stabbed 9 times and he was strung out on meth. And he used to, stir the pot. He claimed he was a gangster. And now my friends were going to jump me at one point in time because they were like, oh, your cousin claimed this. Are you that? I'm like, nah, bro, I'm not in that shit. Yeah. So it was one for me, going through those things, but even going to the military and trying to change it. And I started drinking heavy. And it was something, ruined the relationship with my wife when we first started dating. And it was something where it was like gradually got better over time. And luckily she never gave up on me because she believed in me. But it was one of those for me where it was like, man, are you going to repeat all this BS that happened to you? Or are you finally going to wake up and just be what you need to be? Like, what is the difference of why you're doing it? What's going on? And in my case, it was really doing that. So was able to stop drinking. I ended up getting out the Marine Corps and I'm working these jobs and like first one, home improvement, sales and a straight commission. So that was rough, because I had a 7G month and I had no money coming in for 2 months because my deals were canceled. Went to a mortgage brokerage. And to add context, when I was in the Marine Corps at 19, 20 years old, I was my own boss, but that did 2 things for me. It made me become a leader and step up. 2, but that's where I dealt with my ego problem, thinking I knew everything. So luckily was able to get out of that there. But when I'm at the mortgage brokerage, then I failed my test 3 times and I'm like, I'm a failure. What's going on with me? I'm working on my business management degree, getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning, hitting the gym, trying to provide for the wife. I'm grinding all day. When I'm not home, I'm studying or working on my schoolwork, so it was like, and that trying to start a podcast. And it was, all right, now I'm neglecting the wife a little bit. We had a second miscarriage. So mental health is just down. I was just like, man, what are you doing? So luckily we got pregnant again. Week before my daughter was born, I started the Winner's Paradigm podcast. And my goal there, was really to take all those lessons I learned or all the things that I seen. I'm like, yeah, that's not what I want to repeat. And I show people, hey, this is what you can come from. It doesn't really matter. Even the guy that has great backstory or the great family, he's dealing with something and he's going to hit a point where they don't get it. Cause that's what happened to the mortgage brokerage. I was like, these guys are coming off mommy and daddy's couch and they gave them everything. And they're like, what'd your parents do? I'm like, not a single cent since I turned 18. And my dad gave me a little money as a wedding gift for a couch. But I was like, other than that, I never asked for anything. And I never will, because I know I can do it on my own. So it was one of those for me where it was realizing all these things. And that's where I projected in the podcast was, hey, I'm going to find those answers from people. I'm going to help out other people. I'm going to open up and be vulnerable about my journey. I'm going to talk about the stuff people don't want to, where you don't heal trauma. And now I'm literally crying outside and I'm journaling and meditating. And that way I'm able to get that out. So I'm able to constructively get better and then help people.
Wow. Oh, brother. That's such, what a powerful way to start our conversation here today. And there's just so much that I just want to unpack there with you. And I think some notes I had wrote down, some really key takeaways for me is that not all of us come from, a really, a great parenting background. Right. And so depending on how you wanted to deal with that, it could have turned out much differently for you. But you had the internal wherewithal, the fortitude to recognize that you just wanted something different in your life, and to make some of those changes at such a young age. I just want to say, kudos to you. Way to go, brother, for making those changes, because it could have been extremely different for you.
No,
and then
absolutely.
getting on to, just thinking about how, we talk a little bit about fatherhood as well in the work here that we do at the Awakened Man, and we can learn from our fathers on what to do and what not to do. And I'm really grateful that you made that point today, because you were able to still take something good out of the situation that you were in, and
Absolutely.
recognize how you could do something so much better and be a different man yourself. And so I just want to, those are the couple of things that I thought were really powerful.
Thank you, brother. And yeah, for me, good things that my dad taught me. My dad's a hustler, so I seen him make money and do all this shit, whether it was legit or not. But that man would never starve, and I starved him in his house because he didn't know, but I wanted to live that. It's just kind of like, I don't need you, and I didn't. We had that, from a core value perspective. I don't agree with my dad, and I still to this day, don't want to be in the same room with them. But that was something that in high school I realized was like, you have this money, we have no food in the house. But he's like, oh, you could have told me. Nah, it was different, the way that he treated me in that. I didn't want to go to him for anything. And then I had my stepdad on the other hand, working in the factory and working his butt off and, not having a relationship with my mom. And he would work 18-hour days and like he would drink a lot and he would say these, crazy fucking views. And I'm like, bro, I don't believe that, So yeah, he was the guy that took me fishing and that, and he was the same one who tried to shoot my wrestling coach. So it's like, at the same time, like I took both of those two things and I said, all right, I kind of had that. I had the wrestling coach in high school that came in and he was the one that let me talk. So I did anything stupid or, oh, what are you doing at a party this weekend? I'm drinking or doing this. And he's like, all right, cool. And he was able to like somewhat guide me. That's what I was able to do. So for me, it was really like taking all those things and saying like, hey, how do I be the best father I can be? And then two, surrounding myself with other fathers that are like-minded. So when something does happen, and in my case, went into it even with my brother-in-law. He disrespected my father-in-law and had his girlfriend pay for his college. And then his girlfriend's parents went at him. My father-in-law were like, oh, it's a shame that his education is going to suffer because you can't afford it. And he's like, that's not the story. So it was something where my father-in-law asked me, what should I do? I'm like, kick him out. And it was like, yeah, that's not solving the problem. You're only making it worse. And now you're putting that. And that's where I realized like, all right, I need to get some help and I need to like reverse engineer what I'm thinking. And that's part of it as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, I just, and the other thing I just noted looking at my little, my penmanship here, boy, I got to work on that, is that the other piece I thought it was such a great point is about how your wife stuck behind you. And that is so critical for us men as we're going through the challenges in our life that we may not always have that person in our corner, and they may not feel like they're in our corner all the time, but they're there and they're willing to stick it out. And I think it's because of the, I don't know you and your wife that well, but I would suggest that the character that displayed for her must have just meant the world to you to be able to know that there's somebody in my corner.
Absolutely 100%. And it goes through that, there's times where I'm like, she's not supporting me, but for the most part, she was always there. Yeah. And even when I was messing up at the beginning and I'm like, I broke up with her so I can go back with my ex and finish that. And it was just like, she caught me on my bullshit. And it was like, all right, you know what I mean? You forgive me? Yeah. Okay. Well, what are we going to do? She's like, no, you're going to do better. And I'm like, all right, and slowly kind of like the drinking, my sister-in-law is not the personality for me. She's one of those bubbly and just like all over the place. And I didn't notice I had a big drinking problem and this is also what I learned talking to another veteran the other day. Everyone in the military has something they're masking. So that's why at 4:30 when you get off, everybody's outside pounding drinks till 4 a.m. the next day. And it's just one of those, you think it's like common and that, but everybody's running away from something. And in this case, it was drinking. I'm putting a bottle of Jameson down and my sister-in-law's talking. It's just like going about nonsense. And for me, it's like, I hate mediocrity. I hate just going around people and seeing people living the same thing or complaining about their problems and they can solve it, or complaining about money problems, but they're not taking no action to make it happen. Things that irritate me, So my sister-in-law's going, I'm like, yo, could you just shut the fuck up? And I'm like, your problems aren't that bad. You just need to suck it up. You need to figure out how you're going to make the money and then just do it. And I'm like, instead we're just sitting here and we're just complaining about shit. No, you're not getting anywhere. No one fucking cares. My father-in-law looks at me and he's like, pulls me to the side. Hey, are you an asshole or something? And we start talking and like, I start just venting. And then he's like, all right. So yeah, you do drink a little bit, but other than that, we start going through it. I'm like, hey man, I'm sorry, but that's just how I feel on a personal level. And for me as a man, we try to fix things, but it's like, how long are you just going to hear it or accept that? And he's like, oh, well, that's what they do. And I'm like, no, like I'm not going to allow somebody to keep doing that and not help them. And in this case, I come off brash and it's rude, but I'm telling them, hey, there's another way to it. So I could have came off nice from that day I was drinking. And it was just something I learned like, all right, I need to work on this. But two, I do care about people. And it's one of those, it's like, why are you going to let someone else struggle or keep complaining about something when you're like, hey, I can simply show you a solution or show you how to be resourceful. And in their case, they're like watching YouTube videos or talking to people. Oh, now this works for me.
Exactly. Love that. So let's get into a little bit about this winner's paradigm and what's that, you came up with this phrase. I really like it. So what does it mean? What's it all about?
Absolutely. So the winner's paradigm is all about, how a winner would interpret their struggles, essentially. So when you're thinking about it in your mindset and you're like, I can't do this. Yeah, you can't because you're using that word. But when you look at any where you're, through period of time or any professional athlete, anybody who wins, any CEO of a company, they're all finding one thing, and when they realize it, they are like, hey, I need to flip the script, I need to make it happen, I need to figure out a way to win. So in my case, it's like I collaborated with my mentor Zach Babcock, and that was huge because I didn't think that would happen. And it was, hey, you got to find what works for you, and it's different for everybody, it's different on their journey. So the winner's paradigm is all about flipping that, recalibrating, and that's why I like using that word. Because in my case, I seen all this destructive pattern my parents were doing. I figured out it was generational. My grandmother, or excuse me, my great grandfather was a POW. He beat my grandmother, did some things. And from there it went down. She was bringing men out. My dad did it. I started doing the same shit. And I'm like, this doesn't really feel good, because it's like, yeah, you can do it and you can feel good, but that's only 10 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour of your life. And then you're back to feeling like shit, and you're back to being lonely, can't be by yourself. So for me, it was really doing that. And then I talk about the healing as well, because it's like, it's great to talk about business and the mindset that gets you there, but we need to talk about the actual things that affect us as well, because if we're not present in the moment, we don't heal our trauma, you're never going to be where you need to be. And even at that time, you're going to run into it, where in my case, I got married, all that trauma came out. And it was like, my wife's just sitting there, and it's just, and I'm like, all right, well, you can leave the doors right there. And she's like, no, that's not solving any problems. And I'm like, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And so that's great. I love that explanation there. And you were touching on the, being able to flip the script, right? That, really the story that's going on in our lives, and how we can change what that really means. And so at some point you must have, as you were doing that, and you started to reshape and, flipping that script for yourself, you must have started to accumulate a few wins. But how did you go about doing that? And what does that mean for the guy that's struggling right now? And how would you recommend that they can consider accumulating wins in their life?
So I'm going to flip this real quick.
Yeah.
I'm going to set the stage, because I could speak for that. So in my case, I had 3 friends who died in 3 years. My junior year of high school, right after I graduated, my best friend died. And then my other friend died of cancer before I deployed. So when I got out the military as well. And it was tough for me, because my friend that died of cancer the friend that died junior year killed himself. And I never really processed that. I put that down deep, and it sucked, because it was just like, I was sad. Don't get me wrong. I was sad for a couple months, but it was different because I was sad versus actually healing from it. Yeah. And it was in my head, like I was partying with this dude the night before, and then he kills himself the next day. And I didn't think of that. And then even my best friend, we had breakfast that morning. He was supposed to meet with me. So that took that hard. But the friend that died from cancer, I blacked out, and my stepdad, like I said, that happened. He told my little brother, who was 8, he was going to buy him a Glock. So I blacked out drunk, and I was like, I want to kill myself. My little brother, who's 8, wants a fucking Glock. Like, I can't deal with life, And that was the last time I see my friend. I actually got a tattoo for him, and I had a dream, and I'm like crying, and I'm like, brother. And that was, I guess, the way that he communicated with me. Hey, everything's going to be all right. And he touched me, and I woke up that day. But for me, it was all that struggle. I had a grandfather as well that cleaned up everything for me when I was at that mortgage brokerage. Right when I got out the military, a couple months after, like 3 months after, he ends up passing away, and he cleaned up everything in my life. My dad starts doing something stupid. He moves in, he would cover my games. And the last year of life, me and him got close. So it was difficult for me when he died, because I no longer had my person, and my father-in-law is the dad I always wanted. But at the same time, it's like, how much am I going to rely on my father-in-law? And 2, I developed a fear of losing people. I didn't want to get close to anyone, because what happens if my father-in-law dies? Now I got nobody. And it was one, like, I'm going to take that hard regardless. But it was, 2, yeah, I can depend on him, but I can't depend on him every single day for every single thing. I got to become a man. I got to be able to heal the things I need to do. So for me, it was that. How I was able to stack the wins, it was just being grateful, being in the moment, waking up in the morning. I know everybody says affirmations, being grateful, and it's something you're like, yeah, that's woo-woo, but it really was that. It's like, man, I'm grateful to be alive. I got people that aren't here anymore, so I'm really grateful for that. I'm grateful that I get to be a father finally, because my wife was pregnant. It was like, don't be happy, don't be happy, don't be happy. And then even like when she was about to have the baby, something happened, and we were like, oh shoot, we can lose a baby. So I get to be a father finally. I get to do it right. And then 5, it's like, I got to live the life now that I want to. I have a podcast. We're going to help people and really help them recalibrate their mindset. I have a business that I get to work with people who have similar core values and align to me. So it's not that I'm just working on anything or caring about it. It's completely different. So I'd say in my case, I kind of factored all those things. And that's where I started stacking those wins. Is I got extremely grateful. I dialed in and figured out, hey, why am I doing this and how? And then from there, it started doing it where I'm like, I'm not a failure. I'm almost done with my business management degree. So next month is my last month finally. And it's like, yeah, college doesn't resonate with me. I'm starting a business and I can actually make money. And that's what I want to do. So I'm going to go 100% all in it. And it was just doing that, having the conversations we are where you're like, man, I'm learning from this guy. That's a win, because before we would have never wanted to have that conversation. We would never want to be told we're wrong. We would be like, no, you're wrong. I'm not the wrong one. And it's like, yeah, we're spinning our wheels, but getting in the room with the right people all switched that for me. And then even now, went to my partner's event and I got in front of 80 people and sharing my story, and people are coming up to me and I'm like, man, this is awesome. I didn't think that would ever happen to me, where it's like, that's a win, because to me, even before doing it, I didn't want to. And I had that fear. I'm like, I don't want to go in front. I really don't want to tell my story. I just want to like meet people one-on-one. And it was like, no, I'm not going to do that. You got to do what you don't want to do, what's uncomfortable.
Yeah, for sure. And yet you challenge yourself to do that. And that was a great, I just like really like how you put that together. And I think that, for a lot of us, we don't recognize the power in being grateful. And because it's, we're in a society where it's all want. And when we can take that moment to just be grateful for what we already have, that we have everything that we need right now, right in front of us. And it's about having that, like, as you say, recalibrating that mindset or flipping the script on what life really means, I think is, really key. And the message you're bringing to the table today, I think is just phenomenal. So well done.
Appreciate you, brother.
Yeah. So what kind of resources do you have, like, for people to learn from? Do you provide any resources in your work with your podcast and other work?
Good question. So my main resource is the podcast, where we have these conversations. And then what I do too is I'm real vocal on it on Facebook, to where I post these and then put them on my blog as well on my website. That way people can read it and that. And then I'm always posting books as well, where I'm like, hey, I read this book and it helped me. And this is where it allows me to do that. So I put more of the personal touch on there, and then have, one-on-one calls, and especially with clients, dial that in, so I can be able to do that. So I set the frame so it's like everybody sees what I'm doing, I'm living it. And then I have you, hey, if you want to talk sidebar, we can. And I can be able to be there for people. That way it's not just me forcing a PDF down their throat and someone's just reading this and like, no, they're seeing me post books and I'm reading that's helping me out. It's me opening up every single day and I'm talking about projecting your emotions on a child and how it affects them for life and what it looks like, you know what I mean? And why, I have no time for that nonsense. And it's one of those where people are like, yeah, that resonates with me. Comment on there, and now we're having that conversation. So I make it more interactive on that case. I know in the future, I'll have more of an organized course in that, but I felt like right now, where we're at, I wanted to be able to have that personal feel and just really, take the time to help people.
Love that. And, there's a saying that leaders are readers. And so I'm really grateful to hear that that you're that type of guy. And that's the kind of work you do. So, because I wasn't a great reader in my younger days, but I read every day today now, and I've been doing that for several years. So tell me some of the books that you're reading that really impacted your life and help shape who you are today.
So first one, actually, so first book that started with me was 50 Cent's book, Hustle Harder, Hustle Smarter. And I liked it because he took the street element and he's talking about corporate America and how there's parallels. And when he was on the street, he's taking out his competition. He's taking out the enemy. He's doing that in corporate America. He trashes the whole studio and breaks. It was a conference room. He starts breaking stuff, throws the TV out the window. And it was like, that was strategic because he knew what would happen. And the media would think that, they're having a fight, but no, he strategically planned that. So it was cool learning that. Then I went into 48 Laws of Power, which I was upset about because I read that too late. The reason why is I had two leaders that if I would have just learned that book, let them and not outshine the master, I would have been a genius.
Yeah, love those. Haven't read the 50 Cent book, but the 48 Laws is outstanding. Love that book. Really, really good.
So that one helped. One Thing by Gary Keller. We always talk about, we do time blocking, but I don't think people really are intentional with time blocking or intentional with their time period. And that's something once I did, that was the first book my partner told me to read, that changed it everywhere for me. And then from there, it was never split the difference, because I really like the negotiation tactics there and what to do, kind of learning these things. And then I'd say is I actually read Jordan Belfort's book, and it was just the one thing that I took from it. The Wolf was, he was just saying, whisper, when somebody's yelling at you, just start whispering. And I'm like, okay, and I start doing that, and they're like, what? And that was the same thing when 50 Cent in his book, he talks about Bruce Willis, and he's like, yeah, Bruce Willis would start whispering at the dinner table or wherever they were at. And it was just the power of, getting people to lean in to be able to hear your message. But two, what you're doing is you're working on tonality. So it's like, there's more of an emphasis on it. So people are like, if they don't hear you and don't try to listen, they're going to miss it. So that was something for me, like learning. Definitely, I was in sales. So I was making calls, people were screaming. I'm like, okay, man, how can I help you? All right, well, and they're like, what? And you just change that temperature. So for me, those books were huge. And then again, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, that was one of them to me, where like I started clicking everything in, but it was one of those where it's like getting through those limiting beliefs. And now it's finally like, yeah, that's how the poor think. This is how the rich think. This is how, the middle class thinks. And you're like, no, it really makes sense on how we're kind of brought up in the school system, or how our parents think of things. And when we do start making money and people are like, you're evil, millionaires are evil. And you're like, actually, I met a couple millionaires, and they're really nice people. They really want to help you. And that, they're not Elon Musk level. And that's probably why people think that. But no, like millionaires are good people, and they have resources to be able to help you, and you could pay them to coach you to get to where you need to be. And I think that's where sometimes people don't know. But when you start putting that work in, you start surrounding, you're like, man, everybody just wants to see each other win. And that's all it is.
Absolutely. That's for sure. And especially I found similar experience in my life as well, with people who have attained quite a bit of like lots of success, where they're millionaires or very successful in business. And it's just amazing to me how open they are to want to share what their knowledge is, because they recognize the effort. And when they see someone like you step up and asking questions, and then they want to support that. And so it's so cool. And that kind of leads me into my next thought and question. You've mentioned a couple of times that, there were mentors in your life. So who would you recommend that people should surround yourself with in order for them to like mirror their lifestyle or mirror what they're doing? Who would you recommend?
Yeah. So you're asking who would I recommend?
Who should you surround yourself with if you want to really mirror their lifestyle? So who would those what kind of attributes or what type of people would that be?
Absolutely. So you just got to find people that are where you want to be, number one, but two, who align with your core values and who is doing what you want. So that's why I say, like, even for coaching clients and working with them one-on-one, like I don't press it. I don't put my offers out like that, because I don't want that. I want you on a personal level to reach out to me. I want to be able to show you, what it is. In my case, like being around the right people is huge, because I no longer get that, why did you start a business? That's stupid. And in my case, I shut down. I'm like, well, I don't want to talk to you. Like, why would I want to engage in this conversation if you're already closed-minded on that and haven't got to that point where you're like, maybe I should start my own business. So in my case, it's like, when you're around the right people, it all starts clicking. Core values are huge, because you're definitely going to be able to see that. But two, you're going to be able to understand who you're around when you start just talking about what your aspirations are, what you're passionate about. People are going to feed off that. So if you have the energy and you're like, man, I really love helping people, or in different cases, like, man, I really like flying. And other people are like, yeah, that's actually pretty cool, and you guys meet there, it's so much better. So in my case, like, I got involved with Zach Babcock and his team early on, was working in their monthly coaching calls and groups, and slowly built that relationship, started building a business with him and partnered. And that was something I never thought I would do, but it was crazy just off the recognition. And two, it was like, no, we're talking about core values. We're living this way. We're healing trauma. And he's like, that's just it. We can worry about the business stuff later. And I'm like, no, I don't know. And he's like, no, you'll figure it out. You'll learn it. And I'm like, and even like people realizing that, like, man, I want to rock with you for who you're hanging out with, because that's power, and what they're doing for you is better. And I'm like, I became that. Or for instance, like I went to a conference, his event the other day, and it was just like, hey, when you go home, first thing you're going to do, you're not going to talk about the trip with your wife. You're going to, take your family out, go to dinner. You're going to spend time and be present in the moment. Shut your phone off. And I'm like, okay, and it was awesome, like having that, because at the same time, it's like finally being around those people who will check you when you do something dumb, or be able to give you that good advice. So it's like, you're not just being that, you're not out here flirting with a waitress and thinking it's funny. It's like, no, you're actually dialing in on what you're doing. You're actually who you need to be. You're actually around the people who are going to hold you accountable. And I say that's the most important part is once you start developing that just be appreciative of it and understand, like in my case, meeting people for the first time that will do anything for me versus people I knew my whole life who don't care about me essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree with that. Now, it sounds like throughout this whole journey for yourself, you've been really challenging yourself and evolving to get to these new heights. So how important has that been for you in order to get to the level that you're working at today?
You 100% have to. And in my case, it was more analyzing patterns and seeing things. And hey, someone wasted 20, 30 years of their life doing the same thing, or crying wolf, but not doing anything about it. Or in my case, seeing someone, hey, 6 years later, still in the same position, but has a problem with everything, wants to run their mouth. And it's like, well, maybe they're bitter. So in my case, it was observing that firsthand and then being like, I don't want that to be me. And don't get me wrong, in my case, yeah, I was partying, I was drinking, I was acting stupid. But when I started cleaning it up, that's where I realized that when I stopped drinking as heavy, and I say it now, I'm not a drinker now, but I do have a couple of drinks, and that's what I like it. And I leave it open for that is because I want to connect on that time. Sometimes, when it's people and hey, we're having a couple, it's not, we're pounding them. And I know that I got to wake up early to hit the gym the next morning. I got a little one that wakes up at 6:15 in the morning. So that means I got to be up at 4 to go to the gym. If not, 6:15 is going to suck. And I already physically feel terrible every morning because I have really bad joint problems from the military. So for me, it's having those priorities. And when I stopped drinking, and I actually took 2 6-month periods off, that's where people are like, you're a square, you're boring, you're that. And that's where I realized it for myself. It's like, well, that's not my crowd, and it's like, they don't even know me as a person to be saying that. And two, it's like, why do I want to be that guy forever? Like what happens when I have serious medical conditions, like, oh, you're no longer who you used to be. And then I'm going to worry about identity issues. So in my case, it was like solving that identity problem there. It's like, nah, I'm not a drinker, kind of like the AA when they talk about you being an alcoholic and I'm an alcoholic. And yeah, I agree to an extent, but I'm not, I can change it. And in my case, like I'm not an alcoholic anymore. So I say anymore because I don't identify as that. Why am I going to label myself, put myself in a box that I'm not in? And yeah, I know my vices. I know that when shit happens and if it's too much trauma, I can lean to the bottle. And now it's having that, knowing I can meditate and have other means that's going to distract me from it. So in that case, having the set procedure to solve the problem is huge.
Yeah, absolutely. And because you're awake today and you're conscious about what's going on around you, you're able to take action and take responsibility. Whereas before, it probably was a little more challenging from what it sounds like from the story for you to be able to even be able to get to that point. And so it's just amazing to hear your evolution from where you were to where you are today and how you've made such great changes and strides. And so I wanted to have this one, last question here for us. And that is, we talked about a lot of stuff today, but and maybe there isn't something we haven't touched on yet, but if there was one thing you wanted to leave our listeners with today, something for them to remember, what would that be?
So the one thing I would say, and it goes in hand in hand with my business, Alpha Influence Media, is it's helping other alpha podcasters, entrepreneurs get aligned to their ideal audiences so they can deliver massive impact and really, harp on the influence they want. So I'd say in our lives, you're influencing people, period, but it's really about that impact and what is behind it. So in my case, like I'm an introvert and I use that as an excuse and like, oh, I'm an introvert, I can't talk to people. But no, it's not I'm an introvert, I can't talk to people. It's I'm an introvert. I have problems where if I don't click with you and I don't feel like we're on the same page, it's hard for me to engage in that. So when I'm around the right people, it is, and I'm able to have that impact. I was flying to St. Louis and the girl next to me, she had alarms on her phone. She had 3 alarms on opposite: study, break, or study, nap, break. And I was just like, that's pretty awesome. And I was like, hey, you do that too. So from there, we're talking 2 hours, open up to each other, said some things that she's never told anybody. I start telling her, I'm getting a little teary eyed. I'm like, yeah, I know exactly how you're feeling. I've been there, done that. So it was awesome being able to do that. But I'd say that's the best part about that impact is, you being able to do it and then helping people, being vulnerable. Everybody always says the authenticity, vulnerability. Yeah, it goes hand in hand. But I'd say more on the vulnerability side is, yeah, you can be authentic and you can say it, but people can tell when it's genuine and it's coming from that place versus when you're just saying it to say it. And yes, it could be you, but they can tell when there's a little hesitation on it. So me, when I didn't want to get as vulnerable, when I didn't want to open up about the stories, but when I started saying, yeah, that's what happened, or in my case, my parents flipping the script and like questioning me on things, making me feel like I'm the crazy one. I'm the one that has a problem, but they're still in the same situation they were in 20 years ago. It's like, yeah, that's not me. I dictated it differently. So I'd say that would be the one thing, is you're going to influence people, period. But it's really about going down to the underlying problem. How are you making an impact? How are you making a difference in the community and other people's lives? Or are you just being that one that's just going along with everything?
Yeah, perfect. What a powerful way to wrap things up today. I just want to say thank you, Alundas, for spending time with me today. And flipping the script is something all of us can do, and we should be doing daily, and not just for defining success, but in all aspects of our life. And the better we get at flipping our scripts and chalking up wins, the more momentum we're going to create, just like you have. So how would our guests get a hold of you and get involved in one of your programs, or get involved with the podcast?
Absolutely. So the best way is going to be my podcast, The Winner's Paradigm. The website is thewinnersparadigm.com. As long as you're just listening there, I'll be able to walk you through step by step, how to be able to sign up on the contact page, or how to be able to follow me on social media so I can be able to interact with you as well. So best way to get a hold of me is thewinnersparadigm.com, and then the Winner's Paradigm podcast.
Perfect. Well, I'm going to make sure all that information is in the show notes for this, so people can have a quick access to your website. Once again, I just want to say thank you so much for spending time with me today. It was an outstanding conversation.
Thank you, brother. It was an honor to finally be on.
Thank you for listening to the Revolutionary Man podcast. Are you ready to own your destiny? To become more the man you are destined to be? Join the brotherhood that is The Awakened Man at theawakenedman.net and start forging a new destiny today.